So you may know that there were 1,300 bots created in Iran that pretended to be Scottish nationalists. There were photographs of rather handsome young men wearing kilts, so expressing strong views about Scottish independence, and garnered a very large number of followers and produced a lot of propaganda, pro-Scottish independence propaganda. And when the internet went down in the summer in Iran, then all of the bots disappeared, and then they came back. And they, for a while, forgot who they were and talked about the supreme leader, and then remembered that they were supposed to be Scottish nationalists, went back and talking Scottish nationalist propaganda, and then came offline again during the recent attack on Iran. Quite clearly created bots, and there's been a lot of publicity about them. And what I'd like to know is, was what they were doing some sort of offence that has been identified, that is this new foreign interference offence, through whatever the legislation is, through whatever department it is that's responsible for that bit of legislation? Have they been responsible for some sort of offence, and who's taking responsibility for doing something about it?
On the first question of whether it's an offence or not, ostensibly to me it feels totally wrong, and given the threshold set in the law, which is that you just need reasonable grounds to infer foreign interference, not conclusive proof of it. To me, without preempting the individual cases, to me it would feel like there's a pretty significant case for arguing there's foreign interference there. And then in terms of who is responsible, the foreign interference offence, I guess in that instance the Online Safety Act would be operable, and so Ofcom is in charge of ensuring that platforms are complying with their duties. Platforms have to make sure that where there is reasonable grounds to infer foreign interference, as it applies to UK residents' experiences, that platforms are acting on it, and not just acting reactively, but proactively. And when they're not doing so, Ofcom as the regulator in charge is responsible for enforcing it.
Edward.
I was just wondering, Minister, given what you've just said, do you use any social media platforms?
I try to limit it, but of course I do, yeah.
Okay. On your experience of using social media platforms like X, do you see any evidence that the social media companies are effectively preventing the spread of misinformation and foreign interference?
I think the main thing I'd say is the online experience at the moment for me, and I expect for all of you, is not satisfactory. And it's not satisfactory in a couple of different ways. There might be instances which meet the threshold of illegality, and when those happen, we have a system to take action in those.
But do we? I'm sorry. Do we have? That's what we want to know. What is the system for dealing with this? I mean, who has dealt with the Iranian bots?
Yeah. Well, I'm very.
Who is responsible for doing it?
So when the foreign interference offence, as covered by the Online Safety Act, applies, Ofcom is the regulator in charge of ensuring that platforms which have the duty to comply with their requirements under the Act are taking action. And so there's a very clear enforcement path there. There's a broader thing which was just brought up, which is misinformation as well as foreign interference. And the reason I highlight the distinction is because there is a huge swathe of information which doesn't quite meet the threshold of illegality, but over time, and it's in its volume, chronically erodes trust in public debate and the public sphere online as well. And I'm as concerned about that. There are a series of things that we're focused on in trying to tackle that. But I have to highlight that Parliament, over a very extended period of time, decided that those sets of cases, legal but harmful cases, were not to be covered in the same way that illegality in the context of foreign interferences. And so I just draw that distinction.
I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the Iranian bots. I want to talk just about that, because it does seem to me to be, there is no argument about this being anything other than foreign interference in our democracy. And so what I want to know is which minister is responsible for dealing with this. I mean, I asked Darren Jones, and I asked, who else did I ask? Dan Jarvis at the Joint Committee for, whatever it's called, National Security, JCNS. I asked both of them when they appeared in front of us at JCNS, and they said that it wasn't them. They said that it was you or your department was responsible for doing it. So I've written to to Ofcom, and I asked Dame Melanie Dawes if she was responsible for the Iranian bots. Obviously there's more than just Iranian bots, but it does seem to me, let's have like one example and let's like focus on it. And what does she say? She says her worry is the existing provisions under the Online Safety Act. She says, where is it particularly? Let me just find it. She says, these are the things that I'm supposed to do, but then she says that her concern is that it's very difficult to prove a breach of the foreign interference offence because she says that the standard is too high and too difficult, and that she's going to look into it and she'll get back to me. She's yet to do so. But I have to set out above platforms' responsibility in relation to foreign interference under OSA. However, as you note, the requirement to meet the 3 conditions in the foreign interference offence is a high bar. We understand that Parliament sought to ensure a balance between tackling foreign interference and the importance of free expression and legitimate influence activity. As a result, the threshold for platforms having to take action is high, as is the threshold for Ofcom holding platforms to account. Nonetheless, we are working to use the powers that we have to maximum effect. Sounds to me like she's blaming you or blaming the government for not giving her enough power to be able to do what she should do when it comes to the Iranian bots.
There are 2 separate questions here. One is the question of who's responsible. I think you've rightly answered that yourself in that context, which is that Ofcom is responsible for the implementation of the law. There's a separate question from responsibility, which is, are the thresholds appropriate at the moment? And the first thing I'd say, as I mentioned at the outset, is that the current bar is reasonable grounds to infer, not conclusive proof of foreign interference. If there is a case, and by the way, there's not a diminished concern. I think this is one of the most central questions for our politics.
I think it's one of the most central questions for our politics, and that's why I don't understand why we aren't able to have a senior minister responsible for ensuring that we're protecting our democracy.
Well, I think on the responsibility question, as Ofcom have themselves told you, they are responsible for the implementation of the Online Safety Act. I am the junior minister responsible for it. The Secretary of State is the senior minister responsible for it. On the question of the legal threshold, which was the second separate question raised in your most recent point, I am very keen on making sure that we're reviewing and looking at where we expanded. I have not seen any evidence at the moment from Ofcom that the low bar that I mentioned is insufficient, but I will do everything to try and expand that bar if that evidence is there and if it can be an effective way of tackling this challenge that you and I think align on.
Well, let's put it this way. Even if the Iranian bots haven't been dealt with by way of the new legislation, if the bar is at the same level, presumably there would be an example of foreign interference that had in some way been taken down or dealt with because of this legislation. Could you give me an example of that?
So, platforms have a responsibility to comply with the Act. I suspect there are many cases where they've done so. We do not ask platforms to report every single instance where they've taken
just
action.
One. I only want one. Can the platforms give us one example where they have taken down foreign interference, attempted interference in our democracy?
I'm very happy to write to the platforms and ask them for data.
But you don't speak to them on a regular basis.
I do speak to them on a regular basis, and so does the rest of government.
I'm defending our democracy against foreign interference.
What I don't ask for is data on their internal compliance with the law in the instances of non-compliance, and the overall compliance with the legislation is something that Ofcom is responsible for. But I'm, of course, in this instance, I know they've been in front of you, and I hope they were asked this, and I'm happy to ask them again in the future. The other thing I will flag is that the Online Safety Act has been live for materially less than a year, and so this is not something that has been around for years and years. I want to make sure that it is acting robustly, and we will go further on this question wherever it's required as well. But this isn't something we have long-standing longitudinal data on.
I'm sorry. It's been around for a year. We've had elections during that year. We've had democracy during that year. And you can't give us one single example where the platforms have taken down material that has been interfering in our democracy. Don't you think that we're getting a little bit complacent?
Well, with respect, the Online Safety Act has been around for less than a year in its implementation of illegal content duties and child safety duties. And to my knowledge, we haven't had significant national level elections in that period. That all said, I am as concerned about this question as you are. I'm just keen on grounding it in both fact of the law and urgent action and engaging with the platforms. If you want me to go and seek that evidence, and I would happily do so independently too, but we have to make sure that we're proceeding in a way that is grounded in law and where we are.
So we know that platforms do take down foreign interference content. They publish some of that. I know they gave you some of the examples. I think the question is, are they doing enough? That's a question for Ofcom as the regulator to assess. They are doing some, but the law now makes that a requirement. Are they meeting the requirements of the law? I don't know. That's for Ofcom to assess, and I know they're looking into that.
I was just wondering, are you aware of how many times Ofcom has referred an incident for prosecution? Or has intervened to demand on a particular incident, how many times Ofcom has either demanded something be taken down directly or referred it internally within government as an example of malign influence, or referred something for prosecution if that is its powers?
So what I am aware of is that Ofcom engages very consistently on reviewing risk assessments and compliance of the platform's duties, especially illegal content duties, which is the subject here. I'm not aware of data on prosecutions or referrals that they've made in light of illegal instances in this context.
Are you able to find out if there has been?
Yeah, I'm happy to write to Ofcom on this.
I ask this question because when we had the Electoral Commission in front of both this committee and the Joint Committee on National Security, and we asked how many prosecutions there had been, I think I'd have checked the transcript, but relating to foreign interference in terms of funding issues, they said there hadn't been a single case within the last 5 years. I guess what I'm touching on here is that if the Electoral Commission has not seen any evidence and Ofcom has not seen any evidence either, we are completely overblowing this threat, or as I suspect, we are not doing a very good job of identifying the threat at the moment.
Well, I think it's a really important question you raise. So on the question of funding, of course, that's separate. There is a live case under the foreign interference offence that you'll be aware of in the courts, and so I won't comment on that outside of the online space. And in the online space, as I mentioned, I will absolutely write to both platforms and Ofcom to understand whether there have been any instances of referrals. But the main thing I would say is my understanding is that the threshold set in the law is relatively low. I'm not happy with the quality of information that we're engaging with online, and so I will, of course, keep pressure on Ofcom to make sure that it is acting robustly.